Thank you for auditing the always positive new music review show hosted by a French professor who's outside. I'm outside. It's getting pretty cold here, Western New York, late November. But it is late November, and whenever I have a commission in my top tier for Patreons, I try to do it within the month. I don't always do it, but I try to do it. And this is sort of like a double, because I'm going to be reviewing the album LSD TV by Auteur. And if you've paid any attention to the cards at the end, you will know that Auteur is one of my longest standing box set Patreons. So if he's an artist, he made an album before, which I reviewed, and in sort of a very sweet way, his friend Joe Seal joined up at the same level to get me to review his new album. So that's nice. So you have to excuse the fact I'm inside. I'm not my usual recording place. I would have, but the thing is the amount of space that my videos take. There's like certain times during the week where I can take up that space in the house, and right now I just can't. 2 kids. It's got rained on. 2 kids with the flu, and my daughter's being fussy. My baby's being fussy. So I'm here to talk about the next Auteur album, and I'm super happy because I personally like, Auteur. He's been a big supporter of this channel. He's talked to me a lot about hip hop, about messages and about his art. And this album is a real step up. And I'm happy to see that. I'm happy to see that, obviously. Man, I keep getting rained on. I might have to move. But I'm just happy to hear this growth. And because it's really tricky doing these commissions, especially when the artists themselves commission them. Last month it was Linus. By the way, I think they would collab quite well with each other. Because, I'm trying to be supportive and positive while at the same time offering good critical support. And that's a hard thing to do. It's a really hard thing putting yourself out there, especially, when you feel like you don't have the kind of audience that can give you the feedback you need. So when I heard this, and I liked it, and I think it was a step up from the last album, that made me happy. And what I realized, a couple things. One, I'm just going to keep on getting rained on. That's what I'm going through for this video. So thank you, Patreons. Here, if you look up, you see that right there? There's like it was raining, so there's all these water drops that just keep falling on my head. Raindrops keep falling on my head. Oh. So, like when I listened to the first album, my main, not even necessarily a criticism, but my main thing is that like his voice, he owns his voice. And his voice is not a typical rap voice. It is a very noticeably white voice, a voice which at times one would even go as far as to call sort of nerdy. But at the same time, like he raps about growing up in Gary, Indiana, which is not apparently an easy place to grow up. He raps a lot about sort of being an independent drug kingpin, which is interesting thematics. He raps a lot about dead friends, about poverty. So it's funny to have the sort of the words being said being, pretty solid rap thematics with a voice that does not sound like a rap voice. And so I don't know if it's just that I'm used to it now, which it could be, or if he's figured out how to use it in a way that's works better with the beats. I think the beats match his voice better on this project. I think in general when they're brighter, it goes well with his bright voice. And because he's not rapping about, corny stuff, it doesn't matter if it's a bright rapping over bright sounds. But the main thing there's one term that just kept on rattling around in my brain. It's kind of nice behind me. It's kind of blue. And that's a quote from the TV show Arrested Development, where Job is trying to get his job back from Michael. And he just goes, "I need my job back. I'm an ideas man, Michael. I think I proved that with Fuck Mountain." So the word I just kept on thinking of is he's an ideas man. And no matter what happens, like whether or not, you personally who are watching this warm up to his voice or like his rhymes or his delivery, this album, and the previous album for that matter, are just really filled with lots of very good ideas. And I sort of wonder if, if some like label, underground label or something, just sort of paid attention and saw that this guy has a lot of really interesting ideas, like for samples, for sound beds, for approaches to beats. I think at the very least, he could end up being a really good like producer. Scott Storch. I'm not just saying that because he's white, but Scott Storch, well, white and nerdy. I don't even, I've never even seen a picture of At Large Auteur, so I don't know what he looks like. But Scott Storch is the guy who's kind of behind a lot of Chronic 2001 by Dr. Dre. Sort of like a behind the scenes ideas man. I don't know. That's the sort of sense that I get, and I'm gonna go through it as I talk about this album. A lot of these great ideas while I get rained on from this drain. I'm going to give you a stamp, an example song, click above the evergreens, to hear the song, the final track on the album, White Skinned. If you just listen to this, especially if you heard his last album, this is just a great example of the beats on this album. There's this piano that goes on the 1, 2, 3, 4 with sort of I don't know if it's a xylophone, but it's xylophone-ish sounding descending noise in the back. Eventually the drums come in. Eventually he takes the drums out at just the right amount of time. I sort of know what he's listening to because he often comments on my videos, so it's sort of clear that he's listening to a lot of the Griselda stuff, a lot of this great Invisible Renaissance production, and learning from them and building from what they're doing, and doing what they're doing and doing it well, which is not easy to do. And then lyrically, it's interesting because it's sort of this fractured sense, where it starts off with shout out to homelessness, addiction, and violence. And then he sort of talks about how he's only alive because of his light skin. And then he says, fuck being white, I'm Scottish, which is like, whoa. Like, I was like, oh no, he's not going to go on something like, I'm not white, man, which he's not. He's not doing that at all. It's a song that really gets at the contradictions and the paradoxes that can exist within you when you are trying to participate in black culture at all, which he obviously is, which I obviously do with my video, by my commentary videos. So, I don't even know if I identify as an ally. That's what he says, which I think is a great which is a great sort of confrontational line to himself. And I don't know, it's a confusing song with no clear message, which I think makes it good art because he doesn't have a very clear sentence. He's not saying he's one of the good ones, nor is he saying he's one of the bad ones. He's just very, very confused, and that's what it's about. And it still talks about, institutional racism and can't trust the whites, struggling with white guilt. I have to move. I'm gonna I don't know what's gonna happen, but I gotta move. So let's see. Can I move here? This. You want to see where I'm trying to have the camera? I was trying to have the camera on an old fire pit. Good Lord, what's wrong with me? I don't care if I get these pants dirty because I tore a hole in them today. All right. Sorry, Joe. You commissioned a video and instead you're getting a little tour of my underporch. Much like my students almost got when I ripped my pants. Not funny. So, I really like the ambiguity in this song, but at the same time, it has this ambiguity, but he also is very proud of himself and what he's built. He says, I rebuilt my house, I rebuilt my life, rebuilt my car. And I think these are the best rhymes on the album. I think it's the best combination of flow and lyrics and beat. I really think this shows just an enormous amount of growth from the last album and into this album. So I really suggest having a listen to that song. I'm now going to go through the rest of the album a little bit quicker. Opens up with the song Crossroads of America. I assume this is in reference to Indiana, where he's from. Cool kind of trippy intro. The album's called LSD TV. I don't really know why, except that one of the skills that he has is making sound collages, which I don't understand why there's not more sound collaging going on. I make good sound collages, and I'm not an artist. I'm not a music artist. Why are there not more people trying to do this? So he does it really well. So I think that's the idea of LSD TV, that it's sort of like a trippy, almost like interdimensional cable on Rick and Morty. Kind of sort of like changing the channel and everything's sort of trippy. I think it's more about being trippy than it is about being druggy, if that makes sense. This is where he tells most clearly his story of being a drug dealer on the Silk Road and using a library card. And I'm going to say the same thing that I say to about every single rapper who raps about selling drugs. It's important that people rap about it, and it's not important to me what actually happened. Everyone always gets pissed at me whenever I say that I don't know if Benny the Butcher sold crack. I don't know if Jay-Z sold crack. I have no idea. And I don't think it matters. And people get super mad because the authenticity is what matters. To me, I mean, I believe him because he's talked to me in person. I believe this story. But I find it, even if he's completely lying, which I don't think he is, I think it's actually really important that someone is rapping about dealing drugs through the Silk Road, through the dark web. I mean, this was a real thing. So this picture that he's drawing of himself as a drug dealer who is getting around the cartels, just sort of a DIY library card drug dealer, is pretty fascinating. You know, that's an interesting character to have. Nice kind of simple beat here. And again, I'm just getting more and more used to his unconventional flow. Maybe my favorite simile, more brutal than the Bible or Shakespeare. It's those kinds of good ideas, you know, talking about how brutal the Bible and the Shakespeare are. There's a certain way where he pronounces the word robbery, which it sort of reminded me of Slick Rick. I know he's super into the history of hip-hop, but like, I almost wonder if that might be another tool in his arsenal to sort of like really overproduce, I mean, like oddly pronounce things to sort of make it even sort of further down the line of kind of quirky and weird. Wonderful flow between this song and the next song, just in general. Yeah, I have to go inside. I think I'm gonna, if I get sick from making this video, the doctor and missus is not going to be psyched. And I'm not going to be psyched either. So the light is going to be worse inside, but we're just going to go there. And I'm going to talk to you about this song, Deep Blue, which is the second song. Now, this is what I'm talking about when it comes to ideas, man, you know? Because, man, this video is just too real. Smash the like bucket if you like it. Oh, that's better. Whew. Sorry, Joe. Now you gotta tour my basement. Jesus. Okay, I'm gonna turn on some lights here. They're not gonna be very good, but what are you gonna do? I'm getting it done before the end of the month. Alright. What do I mean by ideas, man? I think he's a great ideas man because a lot of rappers rap about chess, and he has a whole chess line here, a whole series of chess lines. But to like tie it together to Deep Blue, which is the computer that beat, I don't know, some chess master, I don't know, 25 years ago, it was kind of a big news story. But it's like a really smart way to, kind of go babushka here. It's a really smart way to engage with the thematics of chess, you know, and he goes on kind of a chess run talking about different chess people, and then he does this cool thing where there's just like lots of backwards distortion sound. Again, I'm an ideas man, Michael. I think I proved that with Fuck Mountain. Like, he has this like all the way throughout the usage of backwards sounds, which I guess gives into the sort of trippiness of it, the LSD TV of it. But what I really like is the way it mixes in with this. He repeats his verse 3 times. And it's such a wonderful, distorted, odd beat, this main element of music. It's just great. I mean, really, it's great. Conductor Williams is on this album, produces a track on this album, and I'm going to be honest, he does not have the best beat on this album. I think the Deep Blue beat's better. I think that the White Skinned beat's better. But just, he has this line about how he wants to have 4 Porsches and 4 basketball courts. Again, it's that mispronunciation thing, which I think he could lean into even more. And it's a really good sign when somebody repeats a verse and you want them to. And that's what I wanted to do. I wanted to repeat it. Exit the Loop is the next song. Super strong bass loop. Very well produced. Like there's a certain amount of like funk to it, and his voice goes really well with the funk. At a certain point, the beat gets sort of crossed up and doesn't quite match with the rhyming, but he does it well so that it doesn't sound like a mistake. It just almost turns into some kind of polyrhythm. He teeters right on the edge of what people call lyrical, spiritual miracle rapping. Like, he goes right up to it, but he doesn't cross it. just on this one song. And listen, if you're a white rapper, everybody is just waiting for you to go spiritual lyrical. Like everybody, you have that's a highway and you've got no shoulder. The second you use a 3-syllabled word, people are like lyrical spiritual. So I don't want to be one of those guys. But this is the only song where he even gets close to that, but doesn't actually fall into it. Art Deco has this great backwards orchestral loop. Again, just his backwards game. And he's not the only rap producer to ever have backwards musicianship, but he does it with a lot of different sort of genres and sounds here, and he really makes it work for him. A great sort of movie quote and a sound collage. It really does feel like you're clicking through the TV. I think it's maybe Maya Angelou saying that modesty is not a good trait, but humility is. That's awesome. It's an awesome quote. I Am Elsewhere is the one produced by Conductor. Just great hearing Conductor. We have a problem. A good beat. It's definitely a good beat. Swirling keyboard loop. More stories about the hard upbringing, addiction in his family. And I think, so when I'm getting to that sort of critical part where I'm trying to be helpful and, circle something on the paper, I think sometimes he has ideas, and the ideas are really good, but he gets too excited by them and doesn't execute them as well as he could. So there's a whole thing in here about gentrification. And I don't know if Gary, Indiana is getting gentrified. I imagine it is. So he has a whole thing about how gentrifiers are being upset about the next wave of gentrification, which is totally true. I mean, I can tell you, I used to live in this not great part of Oakland as it was being gentrified. And while I was there, they changed the name to Temescal. And then I came back 5 years later, and there's like apothecaries and all this horse hockey. It was terrible. So like I hated it, but I was part of the gentrification. So, that's a great idea. But then the actual rhyme and the delivery of it isn't quite there. So, and I like his producer tag too. Just someone saying at large, a sort of news person saying at large. Where was the thing? Oh, you know what? I didn't even write that down. I just wanted to remember this. At some point, he calls himself the King of Corn. Is Indiana the King of Corn? Something like that. That's a pretty good rap name. I don't know. I mean, At Large Auteur is good, but it doesn't come out super easy. But like King of Corn, because also like that's sort of playing around with the idea that if you hear his voice and you think the voice is corny, then like having the name be King of Corn and having it tie in, I don't know. What do I know? I really like Greatest of All Time, the next song, which is, I suppose, co-produced by someone named Steel Tip Dave. Another great sound collage with Muhammad Ali, used really well. Just this great blown-out drum machine. I could listen to Muhammad Ali talk just for hours. And the whole thing's introduced by a discussion of the MPC drum machine, which is really quite nice. And then just settles into a great backwards beat. You're going to hear me say the word settles in a lot. It's a little Professor Sky hack. I tend to talk a lot about things settling in, but it's one of my favorite things. Like I love deep dish pizza. Speaking of the Midwest, and it's not the cheese that I love. It's where the cheese and the crust meet. There's like this, like you kind of peel it apart, and like this burst of heat comes out, and like that space. That's like the settling in space. That's what I think of, like when a drum line comes in, or when someone produces something and it's kind of everything going all over the place, and then something settles in. That's one of my favorite things that happen. This album is filled with these sound collages that then settle in to music. This talks a lot about fentanyl and the drug trade in the Midwest. There's sort of an anti-capitalist run on this album as well. Talking about sharecropping. And then just some great drumstick sounds until eventually we get to the description of Ali turning all of what was then known as Zaire against George Foreman with Ali Boumbaye, which I think comes from the movie When We Were Kings, which you cannot find streaming. You can't buy it. You have to find the DVD. When We Were Kings is like one of my favorite documentaries, except for the absolutely terrible song at the end. The song that goes over the end credits is the worst song. It almost ruins the entire movie. But the story of When We Were Kings, it's just great. Van Gogh is the next song. I'm not going to call it Van Gogh. More backward sounds, almost settling on these beats, changing. Another reverse sounds, almost random sounding hi-hats. More sort of vaguely anti-capitalist stuff. Tax money comes first, divert us from the circus. And then there's like a flute solo and like drum sound, very jazzy. And it ends this cool kind of like rhyme run that he goes on. Judge my ability is skin deep, you're a hypocrite like the hick from French Lick, always hit a swish. Listen, I'm from Boston, so when you're from Boston, you know exactly one thing about Indiana. That's that Larry Bird is from Indiana. So he's comparing himself to Indiana, to Larry Bird, and I think that sort of makes sense as being, you know, a white guy from Indiana who is performing at a high level in a field that is traditionally seen as being better, performed better by African Americans. You know, it all works. It all works together. He's not the first white rapper to compare himself to Larry Bird, but he's probably the first white rapper from Indiana to do it and to do it well. I love Larry Bird. Oh, wait a minute. Do I even have that over here? Seeing as, you know, this is a pretty loose video. No, I don't have it. Oh well. If this were one of my official videos, I would have had that ready. Somewhere in my house, I got a Larry Bird rookie card. I bought it for like $20 30 years ago. Next song is Dilla's Last Days. I think this is a pretty intentional parallel that he's drawing from himself to Jay Dilla and how Jay Dilla made donuts in his dying days. I've still never listened to Jay Dilla's Donuts. I'm aware of it. I am aware of Jay Dilla. I like some of Jay Dilla's beats. But someday I am going to really focus on and take Jay Dilla's Donuts seriously. I understand that it's a sound collage that he made towards the end of his life. I know that, I even think he was at Cedar Sinai in LA. Like, I even know like that much about it. But, you know, it's very clearly, you know, drawing these parallels. And I haven't heard Jay Dilla Donuts, so I don't know if this is a preposterous thing, but a good, I think when this album is at its best, it's when it's in that sort of great sound collage. Where did you find that sound? Put it together. Pen is Might is the next song. Is that a play on words with penis might? Probably. More great backward sounds. Cool kind of harpsichordy loop over the back with then a 4-on-the-floor bass drum. Very upbeat verse. This is what I'm talking about. Like, he seems a lot more comfortable with his voice here. It kind of like falls apart and comes back together. My friend took a life. Now he's serving life. More weird references to fentanyl. Becoming Water, we have Bruce Lee. I you know, there's no genius for At Large Auteur, right? He's Tooth Underground for that. So, but you know, I know Bruce Lee and Muhammad Ali when I hear him. I gotta say, you know, putting Bruce Lee and Muhammad Ali and then putting Hendrix, I believe this is Hendrix. I believe this is the song Tax Free, which Hendrix never officially released onto an album, but he would just play live. It was basically just an excuse for him to jam with Mitch Mitchell and Noel Redding of the Jimi Hendrix Experience. And then later with the Band of Gypsies. I think this is a live recording of, it's at least a Strat playing a wah-wah pedal. So, I don't know. But again, it's a very nice, interesting combination. And Hendrix and Bruce Lee, I think, are pretty similar with their sort of sad, untimely deaths. Okay. NPC Magician. This appears to be, he messaged me, I don't know, a year ago or something, talking about when he met West Side Gun, and this is sort of a love letter to West Side Gun. Sort of like talking about how quickly West Side Gun makes his music, and I like how he said reinvented the flow like West from the East. Because it's really confusing. The West Side Gun is like from the east side of Buffalo, right? Like, I mean, did you have to choose West? Overdrafted is a great chopped up, cut up beat again with the Dave Fellow. Gloves Off, great weird echoing sound. Towards the end, it's a little bit more experimental, a little bit less sort of like verse based. 2 Liters got this great chaotic jazz back and forth, again talking about being in the kitchen. But I really like the way his voice is interacting with the flute. Fuck your job at Burger King, the world is burning. So if I were a rapper, I would totally just steal that line from him. I would like cut that into a thing and like make that a chorus and like throw some like, I don't know, some echo on it, or just like fuck your job at Burger King, the world's burning. It's great. What are the great hip hop lines about Burger King besides Biddies at the BK Lounge by De La Soul? I don't know. There must be others. Breath of God, more flute. I like this because he's sort of taking the flute from the previous song and extending it out. More backward sounds. Again, settling into this great funk beat. The few is an anti-capitalist screed where someone's explaining that many are slaving for the few, and this person's like, I want to be the few, and the other guy's like, what's the point of being the few? And there's this breezy saxophone that's nice, leading into the penultimate song, record skipping, all these weird high synths and swirling all around, which then culminates with the first song that I discussed, White Skinned. So there you go. I'm psyched. I like this album. It's good stuff. And I don't think I'm going to catch pneumonia from recording outside. So thank you to both At and Joe for your support of the channel. It's very appreciated. And I'll get this up hopefully tonight. All right. Well, until next time, is there something else I was going to say about this album? Oh, yes, he does the artwork himself for the front. And it's neat. He does cool, kind of Dali-esque art. It's cool. That's what I was thinking. Oh, yes, and apparently West Side Gun told him that his art was good. So that's super cool, because obviously West Side Gun is the greatest art curator in hip-hop history. I mean, there's not that many, right? I mean, a lot of rap artists buy art, but very few of them curate it. He's like the only one who does. All right, I gotta go. I gotta go get pizza for my family. There's the camera.